Every couple's going to have differences. I wish I'd learned how to solve those without arguing, which means you have to learn to listen to each other, treat each other as a human, let them have thoughts and feelings that are different from yours. Don't condemn them for thinking differently. Try to see where they're coming from. Learn how to listen empathetically. Look at the world through their eyes. Man, I wish I'd known all that stuff before we got married. A few years ago, I wrote a book called Things I Wish I'd Known Before We Got Married. 12 things I know now, had I known then, would have made my marriage much easier, and because my wife and I had tremendous struggles in the early years of our marriage. So I want to share some of those with you today. One, I wish I'd known that falling in love is not an adequate foundation for marriage. The reason I say that is we've studied this in-love experience now. The average lifespan of the in-love euphoria is 2 years. We come down off the high. And now we have to transition into what I'm calling a second stage of romantic love. I wish I'd known that there were stages of romantic love. And the second stage is much more intentional. And that's where we have to learn how to keep love alive in the relationship. And that's where the concept of the love language, knowing the love language of your spouse, is going to help you keep love alive once you come down off that high. And then I wish I'd known the old saying, like mother, like daughter, like father, like son, is not a myth. If you want to know what she's going to look like in 10 years, look at her mother. If you want to know what he's going to be like in 10 years, look at his father. Now, when I share that, young people will say to me, "Oh, no, you don't mean I have to be like my father." I say, "No, you don't have to be, but if you're not going to be like your father, you need to be identifying the things in which you do not want to be like your father." For example, if he's an alcoholic, you don't want to be an alcoholic, you ought to be studying alcoholism. You ought to learn why people turn to alcohol, and you ought to learn a different way to handle stress so that you don't get wrapped up in that. Because if you just do what comes natural, you're going to end up like your father. I wish I'd known that before we got married. I wish I'd known how to solve disagreements without arguing. You know, when you're in love, you don't think you're going to have any arguments. You don't think you're going to have any differences. I mean, in love, everything, you're blinded when you're in love. Somebody said being in love is like being insane, okay? I'm glad it only has 2 years. You come back into reality. And then your differences are going to emerge. You know, all those things that my mother told me about my wife before we got married, they were true, but I didn't listen to my mama, okay? Every couple's going to have differences. I wish I'd learned how to solve those without arguing, which means you have to learn to listen to each other, treat each other as a human, let them have thoughts and feelings that are different from yours. Don't condemn them for thinking differently. Try to see where they're coming from. Learn how to listen empathetically. Look at the world through their eyes. Man, I wish I'd known all that stuff before we got married. And then I wish I'd known that toilets are not self-cleaning. Never forget the day, 6 weeks into our marriage, I said to my wife, "Honey, the toilet's dirty." And she said, "I know, I was wondering when you're going to clean it." And I said, "I don't know how to clean toilets." And she said, "I can teach you." I encourage couples, before you get married, make a list of all the things you're going to have to do after you get married. Somebody's going to have to buy food, cook food, wash dishes, vacuum floors. Make a list of everything you can think of. And then separately, you put your initials by the ones you think you'll do, and his initials by the ones you think he'll do. And then you share your list and see how many you agreed on. And maybe you agreed on 2/3 of them, but the other third, you thought he's going to do it, he thought you're going to do it. Get that settled before you go into marriage. It doesn't mean you're going to stay there forever, but at least you got a plan going into marriage. I wish I'd known that. I wish I'd known that we needed a plan for handling our money. You know, there's only 3 things you can do with money. You can give it away, you can save it, or you can spend it. But you have to have a plan on how much you're going to put in each of those categories. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of conflicts over money. In fact, some research has shown that conflicts over money is the #1 conflict area in a marriage. Talk about money before you get married. And don't forget the debts that you each might be bringing to the marriage. Be honest about the debts. Don't bring in a debt silently. And then I wish I'd known that spirituality is not to be equated with going to church. The question is, are they really committed to their religious beliefs? If they're Christians, are they real Christians or are they cultural Christians? Let's make sure we're marching to the beat of the same drummer when it comes to spiritual things. If you're going to have a successful marriage, that is extremely important. Well, those are at least some of the things I wish I'd known before we got married. I hope you'll find them helpful.